30 for 30 again. We are back. And as you can see, why China wants workers to clock out earlier. Our weekly podcast on China this week, as the government tells people to work less, will they listen? So this person you see here on this X post, this girl should be pushing propaganda all the time. She don't quit. But you've probably heard one thing you'll hear from Chinese people. Oh, Chinese people. Oh, wait, Chinese people work so hard. No, they don't. Okay, no, they don't. And I'm going to be debunking that. I'm going to talk about that. You've probably heard of China's infamous, 996 work schedule. It stands for 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week, and it's often like flaunted as a symbol of, China's unmatched work ethic, right? And people online say that, Chinese workers are machines, right? And that they grind harder than anyone else, and that America's falling behind because we aren't willing to work like the Chinese. But let me tell you something that most people aren't going to tell you. It's all performative. It's a fake hustle, and the productivity numbers don't lie. We'll break the myth. The idea behind 996 is simple. You work 12-hour days, 6 days a week. That's 72 hours a week on paper. But here's the problem. What's on paper doesn't always mean in practice, right? A lot of Chinese workers take 1 hour lunches, and I'm not talking about eating and getting back to it. They'll do an hour lunch, and then they'll do kind of a tea time situation where they literally take a nap for an hour also. And that's culturally accepted in China. They literally build nap time into the day, you know. I've seen offices that even provide cots or sleeping pods. And I have a personal story that shows how the system works. I went to a job interview once in China. It was middle of the day, and I was kind of worried. I was like, I don't want to, I didn't want to get there at lunchtime, right? So I was like, well, I'll get there at like 1:30, and I'm not exaggerating this at all. I get there at 1:30. I show up to the building, and the doors were open. I walk in, and in the entire building, keep in mind this is like a 30-story tall building. You know, I go in, there's no lights on, and I just see people like sitting at a desk, and even the receptionist at the front desk was like asleep. And I walk around, I think I have the wrong address, and you're kind of like, you don't want to wake people up and be like, is this the right place? But nope, people were just asleep. The whole building knocked out like it was a Sunday morning or something, like everybody was napping. And that's not hustle. That's not grinding. That's not world class work ethic. That's like laziness hiding behind long hours and fake appearances. In the US, if you disappeared from your desk for 2 hours every day, you'd come back and you'd find some schmuck just sitting at your seat, okay? And you'd be like, who the hell are you? And he'd be like, I'm the one doing your job now. And you'd be like, what the hell? You see, that's the difference. In America, we may not work 12-hour days on paper, but when we do work, we get shit done, right? And that's not just like a cultural opinion. Okay, that's backed up by the data. Let's talk productivity. According to the OECD and other international organizations, China actually ranks extremely low in productivity per hour. You heard that. I mean, all the overtime, all that talk about hard work, and yet the actual economic value created per hour worked in China it's really near the bottom, of the developed world. In China's labor productivity per hour is around like $7. In the United States, it's around 70. You're not hearing me wrong here. American workers are 10 times more productive per hour than Chinese workers. 10 times. So much for working harder, right? And that's not just about like technology either. That's about systems, that's about efficiency, that's about incentives. In China, a lot of work is done for appearances. People are expected to be at their desk late into the night, even if they're just scrolling WeChat or, sleeping with one eye open. The culture isn't built around results, it's built around obedience, right? And it's ironic because now the Chinese government is telling people to work less. They're pushing this whole lie flat movement, basically telling citizens it's okay to take time off, enjoy life, slow down. Why? Well, it's because their economy's in trouble. The young people are burnt out. The jobs aren't paying well, and the real estate sector's collapsing, and people stop believing in the system. So the CCP is shifting the narrative. They're no longer bragging about 996. They're promoting rest, relaxation, and even taking days off to go hiking or, watch a movie, right? But here's the thing, none of it's genuine. You can't tell a generation of people to work like dogs, build your notion up through sweat and silence, and then suddenly say, maybe take a nap and, I don't know, drink some tea. It doesn't work that way. The damage is already done and the system is still fundamentally flawed. The people at the top in China don't want productivity. They want compliance. They want workers who don't question orders, who sit in their chairs from sunrise to sunset, who don't innovate, who don't push back, who don't make waves. Just quiet, tired bodies at desk, proving their loyalty by staying late. It's not work ethic, it's control. And here's the other thing that nobody talks about. A massive proportion of China's workforce is employed in zombie companies, businesses that not only exist because of government bailouts or fake demand. They don't create value, they just survive. Factories building inventory that nobody wants, construction projects with no buyers, entire cities built with no residents. If you're working 12 hours a day for a company that's producing junk that no one needs, are you really hard working? Or are you just wasting time in a padded room built by a state that fears unemployment more than inefficiency? You see, we have our own issues here in the West, no question. But let's not fall for this fantasy that China's success came from superior work ethic. It came from massive debt, right? Artificial growth and decades of Western companies outsourcing for cheap labor. And now that cheap labor is tired, they're unmotivated, they're overworked and underpaid, and the lie of 996 is finally cracking. Young people in China are rebelling in the quietest way they can. They're, opting out. They're quitting silently. They're lying flat. They're doing the bare minimum because they've realized the grind doesn't get you ahead. It just uses you until you break. This isn't a system that rewards talent. It's a system that punishes honesty. You say you're tired? Well, you're weak. You ask for more pay, you're ungrateful, you try to leave, you're labeled disloyal. The only thing that 996 ever proved is that long hours don't equal greatness. China didn't become a powerhouse because of 996. It became a powerhouse because the West fed it money and contracts. Now the tap is drying up and suddenly they're rebranding the grind as balance. Give me a break. At least in the West, we're having real conversations about burnout and work-life balance and mental health and fair wages. In China, they pretend none of that matters until it's too late. So the next time someone tells you that China they work harder than America, you look them dead in the eye and say, then why are they 10 times less productive? Okay? You can work yourself to the bone, you can sleep at your desk, you can live at your office, you can sacrifice youth to the grind, and still fall behind in a system that values brains over hours. 996 isn't a discipline, it's a dysfunction, and that's the truth they don't want you to hear. I hope you liked this video. Like, comment, subscribe, and have a good day.